Okay, you can share your screen. You can start with you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for your time. So I'm gonna come in just at the 25,000 foot level. Keone's presentation really encompasses like a much broader of where we need to go with the food security system. But for DBED, we focused on three different sectors, and you'll see me get into that. But what our focus has been is really looking at where our strengths and weaknesses are, and then what are the gaps to helping those industries either anchor or scale up. So a lot of our frameworks based on how do we maybe change the way government invests into our industries, utilizing really hopefully what is a one-time cost, like capital improvement funding or even the general fund, but not relying on a subsidy year in and year over to scale up some of our industries. So for DBED, in our ecosystem, we have 17 either attached agencies, 10 attached agencies, and 7 core divisions. And when we look through what the powers are of these agencies or what current incentives are on the books, there is a really strong ecosystem that can be kind of inserted as businesses establish and then scale up and either look to either do domestic export or even international exports. So for agriculture, we had to take a step back and we had to understand, okay, what is the state of Hawaii's agricultural economy? How do we anchor and expand those in the industry? Our framework is always looking at cradle to career, that incubation to maturity. And then I'll give some examples on how DBED in the state of Hawaii is doing their implementation. So for the state of agriculture, there are 3 areas that we can touch: trade and exports, manufacturing with value-added products, and then just scaling up our core industries of agriculture. That's your farmers and your ranchers. Right now, you can see that on our GDP, agriculture accounts for less than 1% of our gross domestic product. So when we talk about moving the needle, what increments can we measure year over year to see if the investments that we do when we buy ag land, when we invest in the infrastructure, the facilities or the equipment, and what that growth will be. It won't be within 1 calendar year. It will take a few years as we talk to our research economic analysis division, as they sit back and watch the investments that we make and then how that either scales up or remains flat for our industry. What is interesting is that when we looked at several media sources, they rank businesses on how well they are for business. One of the more popular entities that do this is CNBC. So up until the year ending in 2023, workforce development was one of their key top metrics, which means if the state says, hey, workforce development is one of our priorities, CNBC will look at, okay, well, you marketed it, but how much did you invest in it and what are the metrics coming out? So if you were to look at workforce development, we ranked 32 out of 50 states. This year, 2024, they've added another metrics back in. The last time this metric was used was in 2007, I believe, and that's infrastructure. It's basically asking, okay, states or municipalities, are you plug and play ready? So when we look at a lot of the challenges, whether it's in food manufacturing or other product manufacturing, such as fashion and design, they're telling us they need access to facilities, they need access to equipment, even the transportation logistics of interstate as well as export. How do we open up and help with the cost to that? So infrastructure is key, and that is one major pillar in DBED's framework. So we had to take a step back. We had to look at land use as the priority input for a lot of our mandates and a lot of our goals. So there are 3 areas overall that DBED has to balance. 1, first and foremost, is agriculture. 2 is energy. 3 is housing. And now let's touch a little bit here what this slide covers. So we have the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. They're coolly on us to look at what is the state's plan when it comes to land use, economy. What is that direction? What is our North Star? We look at the mandates set by the legislature. You have double food production by 2030, 100% renewable portfolio standards by 2045. Then you have the housing goals that are set, both at the state level and the local level with the counties. 50,000 units are needed over the next 10 years. The governor set a goal, 13,000 units by 2026. All three of these, the goals and the mandates, compete for the same resource, land use. So when we started to look at the energy maps put together by Hawaii State Energy Office, they basically said, okay, for the county of Oahu, if you want to hit 100% RPS by 2045, here are the type of projects that need to be put into place, and here are where they are to be located. You had onshore wind, offshore wind, rooftop solar, PV plus battery storage, and then biofuels. When you looked at the wind, the biofuels, and the PV storage, those projects end up on ag land. So you can't really have the cart before the horse on this. At the end of the day, food security is one of the top priorities. We had to put and look at agriculture first. So first we have to figure out where and what lands do we need for food production. We're working with the University of Hawaii. They've started to develop crop commodity maps. And what these maps do, and I'll pull them up later. They start to look at what we're currently growing and where. And then we're overlaying with OPSD land use classifications, A through E lands. Of course, A being your important ag lands, down the scale to D and E lands being not so productive, even for livestock. So once we overlay that map in our GIS, then we can say, okay, now let's overlay the irrigation systems, because the crop commodity maps are based off of going up to 100% production with irrigation. So then the state can now look at the maps and say, okay, if we are going to be productive in food and chase food security, state needs to acquire those lands. We have to make sure this irrigation or acquire irrigation systems or put in the irrigation systems to those lands that are A, B, and C. Then once we've determined, okay, these are the lands that we've identified for food production, you can overlay the energy projects and see if they coexist. Can solar coexist with that ranching or farm production? If not, energy office, you need to remove that project and figure out how you're going to make up that energy megawatts somewhere else. Then it comes in with the overlaying of housing. DBED is working with the internal group with our HHFDC, LUC, HCDA, OPSD. Our approach there is to say, okay, 30,000 units have to be on Oahu in the next 10 years. Just start plotting those units that make sense within the TOD corridor, along the TOD corridor. If you have to go single family residence, start within the urban growth boundary. If you press out, it has to be for future growth, because then you start to understand if you really need to go back to the LUC for district boundary amendments or changing land use classifications or zoning laws to accommodate the future growth for housing units. What also that does is we've always seen competition between ag and energy projects, agriculture and buffer zones to schools and communities. There has to be a state plan that says this is where agriculture will happen, conventional and non-conventional, such as indoor or vertical. And if you're going to expand housing boundaries, they have to understand that they will be next to an agricultural industry or an agricultural operation. So sectors that diversify our economy, the Research Economic Analysis Division, they do an annual report on the emerging sectors. Basically, we asked them, okay, who determined what these sectors are in its government through policies and resources and appropriations. So as we dive into these three sectors, tech innovation, creative industries, and product development, these are the three industries that we're focused on: value-add products, food and non-food products, and then intellectual property. So our incubation to maturity framework relies on 4 pillars. These are the 4 areas that government can touch. We can do workforce development, working with the P20 system, and they work with the University of Hawaii. We're focused with the community college system, as well as Department of Education. Infrastructure and facilities, that goes back to the metrics that those media outlets weighed on and best states to do businesses. The policy changes. So working with the state legislature or even at the county level, new laws, repealing existing laws or amending existing laws. And then the layering of incentives. This is existing incentives and any new incentives you might want to consider introducing at both state and local levels. So we have to work backwards. We have to understand from the industry what their challenges are. If it's land, access to infrastructure, access to equipment, we have to understand where those assets are. Does the state own them, or does the state need to acquire it? What that workforce pipeline is. So talking to farmers, they need maybe certain certifications or certain licenses for certain applications. It can be with insecticides, pesticides. That's one thing. If you're doing vertical farming, there might be the need for some STEM or robotics understanding, working with the DOE on that. Identifying additional resources that are needed. So such as this year, we're asking for a crop commodity coordinator to be added to the Agribusiness Development Corporation to undertake the work that myself and Dean Parwinder Grewal at the University of Hawaii are doing to align the crop commodities, and then leveraging our DBED ecosystem. One of the main focuses for DBED is growing our tax base. So the argument can be made before we consider any general excise tax increase, before we consider any fee increase, we have to tap other resources or create those opportunities, and exports is one of them. So the green blocks are related to ag specific. Exports include the value added products, things that, you have Melly in the room, things that come out of her accelerator programs. We have to explore the intellectual property. We got the University of Hawaii. They do a lot of research, a lot of trials, a lot of different breeds of ornamentals and horticulture varieties. How do we capitalize on that? And then the tech and innovation side. And we'll be looking at a proof of concept in the Moonlight Tech Park area for greenhouses, brick and mortar, and then welcoming a innovation facility as well as a manufacturing facility to coexist with the agribusinesses there, helping them troubleshoot, creating software, testing applications, creating applications. So this is our workforce development phase. It is chicken and egg. We either work with the employers, understanding their needs, and is the DOE CTE pathway in place, and also meeting with DOE. And if you ever get a chance to visit Waipahu High School, they have a vertical building which has a greenhouse at the first floor, which they took that technology from New Zealand, AutoGrow is the name, and then integrates vertical to their culinary. So they've created a system on campus to show that from farm to table. And we got to understand, okay, if you have that technology here, you're allowing students to engage in indoor vertical farming. They graduate high school. Where do they go? Over almost actually 50% of our high school students don't go on to post-secondary. So how do we make sure that that high school student can enter the workforce as soon as they graduate high school? And that is one thing what the Moonlight Tech Park would do, is to create those facilities to say, okay, we got these facilities. You learned how to do a vertical farming system. Lease the space here and grow for the state or grow for your business. DOE has 13 CTE pathways. So we've identified which pathways exist, talking with DOE on what curriculum or adjustments they could make, as well as understanding if their pathways or curriculum do align to what the workforce needs are. The 3 specific CTE pathways for agriculture are ag, food, and natural resources. Definitely with business management, having, we talk about sustainability, but you also have to be business and economically sustainable. We're working with the legislature as well as McKinley School for Adults. So not only the high school students or the college students, but also tapping programs or creating a Build Your Farm program with the McKinley School of Adults, so that those adults who want to retrain or think of a new career can start to learn basic farming needs. It's basically our version of Go Farm. So the Food and Product Innovation Network, the goal here is to create new businesses as well as help scale up existing businesses. The CT programs that we're exploring with the DOE are they're listed on the screen. The key here is Leeward Community College. Last March, so exactly 1 year to date, they opened up their Value Added Product Development Center. They are setting the curriculum and will be the hub for the neighbor islands. The spoke community colleges will be Kauai Community College, Maui College, which they have already had their innovation facility open and operating. as well as West Hawaii, Palama Nui, to get their facility. The Leeward program has already been working with Ainata Makeke. There's some Papa Makeke people. We also have accelerators like Mana Up. And then these businesses can grow and scale up. Some successes coming out of LCC. A few of those businesses have gone to experience and test their products at Fancy Food Show this past January, and that was in Las Vegas, as well as a few have entered into contracts with ABC, Foodland, and Whole Foods, I believe. So for DBED, we're not recreating the wheel. We went back and we looked at studies and reports dating back to 2002. All these reports were broadly written, all saying the same thing. We need to diversify our economy. We need to build food resiliency. We need to build food security. We need to take the aging and fallow ag lands left by the plantations and activate them. But there's no plan how, or there was no steps to continue to say, okay, how do we move forward from here? So for DBED, taking back that export model, to get to export, we have to help them commercialize, we have to help them grow, and we got to make sure we can provide what our kuleana is to help them start, whether it's financial resources, partnering with accelerator programs, or providing the equipment and facilities that are of a high cost that these companies cannot afford. It's a three-phase approach. So first phase is the research and develop. This is the R&D phase. You either have a product and you need to refine it, or you have an idea you want to bring it to concept. This R&D phase is the kuleana of Leeward Community College and the sister community colleges. So this work done here in our model is going to be done with the Value-Added Product Development Center. As you graduate out of the facility, you need to test your product. Is there a market demand? How do I scale up? What does my space need? What is the specific equipment I need? So a group of us, including Mele, we toured the Food Bowl in Auckland, New Zealand. That is where this phase 2 comes in. It is a government-supported, but also a non-profit organization. They take in businesses as well as those entrepreneurs who came out of their phase 1, which is Food Pilot, which is run by Massey University. So in this phase, you either succeed or you fail, but you fail fast. What this phase does is, it's basically as if you have your own brick and mortar, but you're leasing the time and space. You're going to have all the equipment that you need. You're going to learn exactly what equipment would work in your model, your space needs. It has the cold storage, dry storage. So the University of Hawaii is helping us do the proof of concept for this phase 2. In the New Zealand model, you spend about 12 months here, another 24 months here, and then you move out to the private sector, your own brick and mortar. We're exploring the development of the state or ADC building warehouse space for long-term leases as the companies grow and need that space. So we have this incubation system of creation to commercialize, scale up to export. So how we came to this point was just talking with farmers, talking with the value producers, and understanding what their hurdles are. During COVID, we saw a lot of small businesses, a lot of cottage industry, great products, leveraging the Made in Hawaii brand, but couldn't scale up. They don't have the access to capital. They don't know what equipment they need. If they did get the equipment, it may have been the wrong purchase or not the model they needed. And we're talking about pieces of equipment that are $50,000. So for Leeward and the Food and Product Innovation Network, there's a bill moving through session now. It just passed out of Ways and Means today. There was a Senate bill, but I believe it's going to stall in finance. But the House bill is continuing to move to conference. It sets up this network of that three-phase approach. You're going to have Leeward as the hub and spoke. So with the UH community colleges across the state, ADC coming in with the commercial phase 2 across the state. This is a proof of concept the University of Hawaii did for the Leeward facility in Waihua. This is what the facility looks like today. It's got 4 wet kitchens, dry kitchens. It's got your packaging, vacuum sealing, labeling, everything that can run a gamut from start to finish, including, and I'm giving them a lot of credit here, what they brought to our attention too was hyperbaric. So this is the first in-state machine that allows us to pressurize using water to expand the shelf life of a product. So now you can get onto the shelves of your local grocer as well as exports. We are in the process of doing an RFP. ADC is to do a high pressure processing facility in Whitmore, which would be the commercial function for businesses to lease time and then run their product through. So I mentioned earlier the access to capital. What these facilities do is reduce the risk and reduce the failure of businesses. They can come in and experiment on hundreds of $1,000s of equipment to figure out what is the right equipment. Just this HBP machine alone was $650,000. The models we're going to put in Whitmore are about 3.5 mil. And these are the larger machines. No company could ever afford that or justify the expense running that machine $40 a week. And that's where we're seeing the state can come in and fit that role of providing the equipment and facilities to help our businesses expand. So there's an ecosystem happening in Central Oahu. This is a proof of concept template that we can scale up or scale down across the state and a lot of the former rural plantation communities. You have ag land that can go from fallow to production. Farmers need to farm. Value-add businesses can be one new market for the off-grades. The second new market will be DOE through their regional kitchen. So 40% of what farmers grow do not go to market. They either till it back in the soil or they dispose of it. Those are the off-grades. And speaking with a couple value-added, or speaking with a couple farmers that tried value-add, they have to either focus on one side of the business. It's either going to be a farm or a shift to value-add. And we heard the same story when we were in Israel. Do I continue making value-add or do I shift and become an algae farmer? This model here of these facilities and warehouses were all a result of talking to the industry and understanding. So we had warehouse production, cold storage, the entrepreneur product manufacturing facility, which I mentioned earlier is phase 2. DOE's regional kitchen will be the first of 9 in state. This will be responsible for preparing 100,000 of the 120,000 meals that DOE prepares daily for its school complexes, and then the high pressure processing machine. So there are 2 things I want to point out just on this slide. In doing this exercise and putting in this infrastructure and facilities, we're helping to strengthen and diversify the economy in the agricultural sector. The second part is the resiliency. So when we saw what happened during COVID, take a company like Hawaii Food Alliance, Chad Buck. If the government were to have told them, shut down, you're not essential, we would be in really bad shape. He brings in almost, if not 80 to 90% of what we import to our shelves, to our grocers, to the Costco's, everywhere you go. Comes in through his containers from the West Coast, through his trucks delivered to the stores. Part of that problem can be done here. We need the packaging and processing facilities to create those products. So we start to create our own MREs. And what I mean by that is the regional kitchen here will be creating menus based off of what is grown on the 4,000 acres surrounding this community. DBED is going to be sending out an RFP, it's in the budget and the Senate draft, to contract to have somebody create menus based off of what we grow. We're in talks with USDA and DOE to understand how we get more of our local staples as qualified products that USDA and DOE will say, yes, DOE can put that on our menus. And what that does is in the time of a natural disaster, when the schools become our shelters, DOE can prepare the meals not only for the shelters, but also for the communities that need provisions. We can run it through the HBP machine, expanded shelf life, store it in the cold storage, and either ship it out on island or to Wheeler Army Airfield, which is less than 10 minutes away to get to the neighboring island. So understanding and addressing the economic challenges, we start to address the food security and resiliency needs for the state of Hawaii. This is on a 42-acre footprint. It can be replicated, scaled up or scaled down across the state. Case in point, we're looking at 40 acres in Kohala, all former sugar. And this all started the same way. I mean, granted, Whitmore was a little bit ahead because the 42 acres was the industrial. So it had some warehouse, it had some infrastructure. However, Department of Accounting and General Services, they are raising that. They're going to go basically all new infrastructure in ground for the most part, and then new facilities going up. So it is a proof of concept that we can replicate. And we're starting to look at neighbor islands to do it. Kauai ADC already has land and some infrastructure. And then we're going to look at what we can do for Maui long-term as well. But this session right now, we have some funding to do Kohala on the Big Island. Another key industry is our pork industry. There is a state slaughterhouse in Kalailoa, which is at full capacity just with on beef processing. Our economic impact through Dr. Tian, so there is an economic benefit if the state were to invest in a small animal processing. So we are asking for funding to do a land acquisition, plan design, or a small animal processing facility. This will help with the hog industry along the Leeward Coast. Also, there's interest from Kualoa Ranch and some other small animal processors. In addition, all those goats and lambs that are grazing the solar fields, there is a need now for them to scale up so you can process, we can create a local lamb industry, hopefully. The other thing that's right on this, I mentioned incentives, new incentives. There's a bill moving through session to give a one-time tax credit to those businesses that will retrofit from dairy to hog. And most of that's on the Leeward Coast too. They're all former dairies that are looking to do hog industry now. This is the area we have along the Kunia corridor to do the small animal processing facility. Irrigation is a major component input for ag. So we're working with Department of Agriculture as well as DLNR and Dole Food Company to acquire the Waihewa irrigation system. The last time a study was done on the economic impact was in 2007. Significant impact for the island of Oahu with small economic impacts, positive economic impacts for the neighbor islands. The ecosystem that I mentioned, so go back to the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, Leeward, ADC, and private. These are programs already in existence. So when you start to overlay the incentives, we can talk to companies that are currently going through Leeward's Value-Added Product Development Center, Business Development Support Division. They run workshops, programs at the Hawaii Convention Center. They can utilize the space upstairs at the Value-Added Product Development Center where they have classroom and meeting space. The workshops talk about labeling, branding, packaging. So as you start to go into the market, what is your packaging going to look like? What are the information that's got to go on there? Work with the nutritionist at the Value-Added Product Development Center for your nutritional faculty. There is the Made in Hawaii program. That is also a federal program, and you have to meet certain conditions to use the Made in Hawaii. The state has the Hawaii Made. And so as we start to build up this value-added product development pathway, we can focus on building the Hawaii Made. Phase 2 is your marketing scale up. As you're successful and you want to go to either export domestically, you can run through HTDC's SBIR MAP or back to BDSD's seabed loan program. And if you're looking to go internationally, tap in the foreign trade zone and the high step. So how is this critical back to agriculture? Again, if farmers make money, that will help them to stay in business. The processing and packaging is not just for value add. Those cold storage, those shelf life are also for the ag producers, the farmers and the ranchers. But value add is one new market for those farmers to sell their offerings to. And that, I'll wrap it up there. That basically wraps up the ag portion. We also talked about energy and housing, all tied into ag.
Thank you so much, Dana. Does anybody have any questions?
I just have one quick one. What is the current revenue that we're bringing in from farming right now? Just curious.
I would have to, we do have that number. I would have to get that from the latest number from our economic analysis division. I'll get the dollar wise. I know the GDP percentage, but not the dollars yet.
But Dane, from the bills coming out this session, I know you mentioned one that's supporting kind of this overarching initiative. Are there any others besides the one you mentioned that's imperative?
So bills relating to at the state level, it's going to be the tax credit for the hog farmers, the Food and Product Innovation Network. There are budget line items relating to the workforce development, and tied with the menu development, the crop commodity position. Those are the main things that DVED's asked for, which is a lot. I'm really happy that all of that is still alive. Some of the other stuff that is relevant to ag, but not in our shop, Department of Ag and Biosecurity. There's a bill to rename Department of Ag to also include the biosecurity as well as funding for biosecurity as well.
Send us bill numbers or send them to Amy maybe and share them.
Yeah, I can do a follow-up with the bill numbers.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dane? Thank you so much, Dane, for your time today. I know how busy you are right now.
No, thank you. I really appreciate you guys giving me this opportunity to tell this story on what DBID's doing in the agricultural space. There's a huge nexus for the counties too, when it comes to certain, there's one key thing when it comes to facilities we may need. It's more of a DPP thing, but it's the public use and structure permit, which allows us to do, facilities, that I think that may need variance, but that serves a public purpose. And then there's always the infrastructure, right? Potable water, sewer hookups. So we definitely will be a partner when it comes to the development of these facilities in the county of Oahu.
Thanks so much for your time.
You're welcome.
Joni, are you good? Okay, Joni's gonna present as, in his day-to-day role instead of as commissioner. Ryan.
Yep. Hi, everybody. All right. So I mean, hearing what Dane shared, it's important to understand, like, I'm really happy with where the state is as far as its planning for, you good?
It's to share.
So how well researched and informed what Dane just shared is awesome, because it's looking at how all these pieces fit together and what the state has agency over as far as what they can do to help scale our ag industry and our ag sector. It's really coming from an economic development perspective, right? How does ag and food fit in from an economic development perspective for the state? I think it's important to note that for OER, we have a little bit of a different charge, and I'll get to that in a second. But the point I want to make coming off of his presentation is, as great as all of that is, it's not enough. Government can only do so much, right? And so I want to talk a little bit more about like a broader systems perspective about how it ties to food. So just a quick overview on Hawaii Investment Ready. We started in 2013 as an accelerator program, and we've evolved over the years, and our mission now is really about investing in economic transformation, and transformation with an underlying kind of understanding and context that Hawaii's economy, the way it is, doesn't need incremental change, it needs transformational change. Like, if you want transformational change, you have to take different approaches, because you cannot just do all these disparate things and expect the system to start to transform and behave differently. So these words are important, and our theory of change in order to achieve our mission is around accelerating the coordination and collaboration of capital to invest in systemic solutions. So when I talk about coordination, collaboration, and capital, what's underlying there is the coordination and collaboration of government, philanthropy, and the private sector. So the three sectors working in collaboration and coordination to invest in systemic solutions. What do you mean by systemic solutions? So I'll talk about that as I work through the presentation. But just a quick overview for us, right? We started as the first native-led accelerator in Hawaii, one of the earliest accelerators. First native-led accelerator in the US. Sorry, that's flipped. But like, and one of the early ones in Hawaii, and we're the first to really focus in on social enterprise at the, this nexus between purpose, business, and even culture for us at HIR, because we're native-led. And so we've evolved over the years, coming out of COVID, had this mission shift, and really decided to focus in that if we want to see economic transformation, that we need to take a different approach. We need to take a systems change approach to our work. And so we've kind of shifted into becoming a systemic change investor, and more of a holistic model. So we've been doing research with the Hawaii Capital Scan within 2022. We started more funder and investor coordination and education across philanthropy, government, and the private sector. And down here it says we also in 2024 launched Hawaii's first calculated capital debt fund. So catalytic capital is this term for where philanthropy provides the first layer of risk to allow other forms of capital to come in to invest where they otherwise put in. So the Honolulu Economy Fund launched last year, and we've completed a few deals of folks that you might know. So what essentially what I get to is that if you want to address a systems problem, like what Dane was laying out. Oh, sorry, wrong screen. On the right one. Right, so OER, right? This is from the website, is to create a strong local food system, and it's about increasing local food production to ensure that more of what we eat is grown and produced here, right? But when I talk about food systems in my presentation, I'm talking about the broader system. There's a lot of interconnected things that happen. There's a value chain from the land and the inputs to the growing and producing of food to the aggregation, the distribution, the processing, the consumption, right? All of those things. So when we talk about increasing local food production, that doesn't happen in a silo or a vacuum. It's part of a broader and more interconnected food system. So you can't just say we want to give more money to producers to grow more food because, like you said, 40% of what they grow ends up in the ground, right? Like it doesn't work that way. Systems don't work in silos, right? So it's important that we think about if we want to increase local food production and we have double our local food production mandates by the state, right? We have more consumers wanting to buy more local. We have institutional purchasing like through the DOE and the schools and the hospitals wanting to buy more food. So we have folks who want to grow and we have folks who want to buy, but yet it's not happening, right? And so we have to ask ourselves why, right? Why is that not happening? And it's because it's a systemic problem, right? The current food system is designed with a 90% import. Right? Like that's how folks in the middle of the value chain, the folks between the buyers and the growers, that's how they've been making their money, right? It's easier to import from just a handful of large global suppliers and bring it in and distribute it out because it's very predictable and easy to do that, right? Like you can really figure out what your profit margins are, your costs and all of that. When we talk about a sustainable local food production system, we're not talking about single large producers. Hawaii is like 80%, 90% small farms. So we're talking about aggregating from a large number of small producers in order to meet this goal. And the current food distribution and aggregation system, again, is designed around the import model. So we need a new middle of the value chain infrastructure in order to realize this connectivity between growers and buyers, right? So it's a systems problem, and a system problem requires a system solution. So, in 2020, Transforming Hawaii Food Systems did a food systems mapping project around this intention of how do we grow more food for local consumption. And they did the mapping, they engaged about 300 stakeholders across the food system, government, private, food producers, yada, yada, yada. And what they ended up identifying is 3 leverage points. So in systems mapping and in systems change work, leverage points are identified in the system where small scale investments can yield outsized impacts in catalyzing system change. And for the food systems, these were the 3 areas, the leverage points that were identified. And you can see how what Dane shared, it aligns with what he was talking about, right? Capital flows, so access to capital and resources into the food system, informing policy for local food resilience, and then local processing, packaging, storage, and distribution, that middle of the value chain infrastructure. These are the 3 leverage area points. If we're going to focus and we're going to coordinate and we're going to collaborate on solutions, these are the high leverage places that we should be doing these investments and scaling up initiatives and efforts. So with this data coming out of 2020 and HIR making it shift to a systems approach in 2021, we redesigned our accelerator program to align with this food systems change strategy. So, taking the data that we gleaned from our research project, the Hawaii Capital Scan, where we mapped out the capital flows over a 2-year period into the Hawaii food systems across philanthropy, government, and the private sector. So we could see where capital was moving, what its intentionality was, what its risk and return profiles were, who was doing what, who are the players. But it also identified gaps in the market and opportunities and recommendations for how we scale up our food system in alignment with like the leverage point analysis and other research and data that we have in Hawaii. And so what we did was we retooled our accelerator. So for the entrepreneurs and the enterprises that would come into our accelerator program, we were really recruiting for folks that were doing work in the 3 leverage areas. It's not an open application process anymore. It's actually a referral and kind of a recruitment process for us to really look for folks that are working in the 3 leverage areas, who also like are ready to scale, who are also very collaborative and open, because when we talk about systems problems, right, like systems and the way the system is currently designed and operating, right, like systems form hard to break patterns, right, they resist change. And so if you want to change the dominant current system, you have to have interventions and approaches that allow you to not just assess where the best leverage points are or opportunities are, but also as you intervene into the system is going to react to those interventions, and then things are going to change and you're going to have to be able to adapt to those, how the system is responding. And so being able to have this coordination and collaboration for the long run, understanding that we're going to try some things and positive things are going to happen, but there might be unintended consequences. So we have to be able to have a framework that allows us to stay in this collaborative ability to iterate over time. And that's what we're trying to design and prototype with HIR. So we're targeting for the enterprises that come into our accelerator on these 3 leverage points. But another innovation that we did with this approach was we created a funder and an investor cohort. So it's 25 food system funders and investors across philanthropy, government, and the private sector, who we've been facilitating as a cohort over the last 3 years now. And with the intention that by them working together, they can do deals and investments that they couldn't do individually. And they also get to leverage each other's capital in ways and also share risk and manage risk with each other. So our accelerator cohorts, the enterprises, we run those every other year. So we ran one in 2022, one in 2024. Olu was in the 2024 cohort. And the funder cohort runs parallel to that over time. So they stay the same, but then we have more opportunities for them to invest and partner and collaborate. And all of them are now kind of in relationship with each other. So the investors and the funders know the enterprises and they're moving capital in new ways. I'm going quick because I know we got time. So. Yeah, I still have time.
This is better than like almost any other report, so.
So when we talk about capital flows and access to capital, right? Like we wanted to focus on building a shared understanding across all of these groups, the enterprises and the funders and investors, so that capital can move in a more coordinated, catalytic way in alignment with the systems change model, right? And so what that's looking like is like, we're able to do what's called blended capital deals. So where philanthropy, government, private sector, they're coming in a blended capital stack into these middle of the value chain infrastructure pieces, right? Like food hubs, processing facilities, processors. You know, these kinds of infrastructure deals, they take a lot of money and they take a lot of resources to do. Like, look at the effort and lift that DBED is doing with what they're doing. But that's not going to get us to doubling our food production and getting us to food security and food sovereignty. So there's going to be a need for more philanthropic and private capital investment in order for us to really get to a place where we're food secure. And so by having philanthropy, government, and private working together and coordinated, they're able to invest together into blended capital models that meet the real needs and risks of these food systems businesses. And it's not just about funding these individual enterprises in the value chain or whatnot, but it's about funding the system. And that is a big shift, right? Understand, because if we just look at, oh, here's a deal, here's a deal, here's a deal, then it's kind of just all over the place. It's not coordinated or strategic in alignment with the shared strategy. So one of the things that is gonna start ramping up this year is we're gonna build on this systems investing strategy. So if you look at this top map right here, right? So but when I talk about doing individual deals, that's kind of this, right? Like, oh, I have a good idea or I have an entrepreneur and like, here's this opportunity and we're gonna do that. That's fine, right? But it doesn't get us to systems change, right? It's incremental change at best, right? Where I think we are in Hawaii is somewhere in this area, right? So like there's some collaboration that's going on, there's shared understanding, right? And now we have the systems mapping stuff. And so we're kind of getting towards a shared vision. And that shared vision is around increasing our local food production for local consumption. But what we're trying to do with our plan is get us to not just being able to see the whole system and who's doing what, but actually co-creating change strategies together. And so how we're gonna do that is through a systemic change investing plan. We're gonna build on the systems mapping work that was done by Transforming Hawaii Food Systems in 2020 and the Lupono Initiative in 2022, right? Where we're gonna build the systems map, redo the leverage point analysis. But what we're also gonna do is we're gonna integrate and overlay the capital flows over the systems mapping strategy. Because what happens is with these systems change initiatives where they use the mapping and the leverage point analysis, is like they can figure out where you need to make investments, but they always run into a problem of getting finance. So we're trying to solve that problem from the beginning by blending the capital and building the capital flows into the map to begin with. And what we're going to be doing with this is developing a food systems change investment thesis. We're gonna identify shared systems goals and metrics, which then we believe is going to be able to allow for better coordination and collaboration across entrepreneurs and innovators, as well as the capital deployers and resource providers in the system. So we can get the counties and the state and philanthropy and the entrepreneurs and the private sector to start to be working in a more aligned shared strategy. And why it's important to have this level of complexity and detail is because investors want to know what their return on investment is. And so what this system is going to allow us to do is that any investments made into this strategy, we're going to be able to track those investments over 10, 15, 20 years against the system's goals and metrics so that we can report the ROI and we can track our progress and be able to see where our interventions are moving us towards those goals or not moving us towards those goals. And this plan that we're putting together is attracting a lot of global attention. It's the folks at MIT Systems Dynamics Lab are wanting to work with us on this because we have the network of people and stakeholders and collaborators activated to take this to make it actually work, because they just have these theories of how this is going to work. They don't actually have the people and the networks to be able to do it. So they're excited to work with us and build that kind of rigor from their practice in alignment with our network practice. And so just to kind of like an overview of the impact that we've been able to do just in these two cohorts is reported of $42 million in additional funding and investment attributed to HIRS from just these two cohorts. And an example of like a blended capital deal that we were just able to do from the last cohort is we just closed a $375,000 concessionary debt and grant blended capital stack to Mokuai Pikokoi in Waipio Valley. It was a Feed the Hunger Fund partnered with our fund and partnered with the Department of Ag for a guarantee, plus a philanthropic grant that we were able to get, plus the ongoing technical assistance allowed this to happen. If we didn't have our network strategy with the entrepreneurs and all of these funders and investors across philanthropy, government, and the private sector, there's no way this deal gets done this fast. And so now we're able to do more of these blended capital deals that are building this value chain infrastructure that wasn't possible even like 3 or 4 years ago.
Is that the point there?
No. But I think the important thing, when I think about our role at the commission and what the city can play into this strategy, one is like Alex's role with the food system. I want her to be a part of the food systems mapping, the systemic investing process. But more specifically, I think the city can support with land access through both easements and acquisitions, zoning, converting existing city properties for ag and food use. A lot of these entrepreneurs that we're working with and food hubs are looking for facilities, right? Industrial space on Oahu is really hard to come by right now. Local food procurement to the extent possible, and then really thinking about scaling our local food system as not just an economic development strategy, but as an economic resilience strategy and disaster preparedness. Like if we just change our frame, then I think that's a really important thing for us as we look at this, because if we only look at it from an economic development perspective, we're missing the longer term, like critical nature of this work. Crisis is our new normal, right? Like I was just at a global conference of systems investors, and I was like, hey, we really in Hawaii need to plan for collapse. Like the globalized supply chains, like we're going to be one of the first ones that get cut off, because these supply chains are no longer predictable. And if they're no longer predictable, they're no longer going to be profitable. When it's no longer profitable, we're screwed. And so I really want us to think about our food security as an economic and like us, like a survivability, like resilience kind of perspective. So it takes a different kind of importance to what we're doing and why we need to collaborate more intentionally to overcome the market forces that have prevented us from scaling our local food system in the past.
Wow, drop the mic.
Yeah.
I have a question. I love what you're doing, Kenny. Obviously, you've talked a lot over the past many years. Do you, like, as you're talking about city and county and other government initiatives, like, where is the bottleneck? I still feel like we need to do a lot more with incentivizing farmers. Like, we don't have enough just stuff we're growing. So, how can we be more
I
supportive?
think it's yes and, right? Their ability to access markets, multiple markets where they can pivot in case there's a shock or a crisis or an opportunity. We don't have that ability yet. That's why the food hubs are super critical to scale up, because the food hubs, their mission and their business models are designed to aggregate from a large number of small producers, and they can pivot more quickly. So if they're selling to consumer and retail, and they're selling to wholesale, and they're selling to institutional, they can shift market channels on a dime. Whereas during COVID, we saw nobody could shift market channels and food was left in the fields, right? We couldn't pivot from servicing the hospitality industry to our local industry very well. But if the food hubs are fully scaled up and they have this kind of diversified market channels, then they're able to better pivot. And again, it goes back to Dane's point, like let the farmers farm. Right?
Yeah, but aren't we losing our farmers, like the aging demographic? Like, we don't have farmers here.
Well,
Are
it's
we
because of
creating-
profitability, right?
Well, I think it's also just interest. So
Yeah.
how do we start incentivizing folks to be able to underwrite and sustain farms so it becomes interesting, it becomes an economic, it has to sustain itself in addition to, of course, having the hub.
I think we're getting there. Just looking at Go Farm's performance and the recruitment of their training program, there's plenty of people who want to come into farming. They just don't have access to where they're gonna go after they go through the training program, and they don't have access to support the market channels. And so the more that we think about it as a system and the pathway and the continuum for these products from field to consumer, that's how we're gonna start to increase the profit margins across the system. But we're gonna need government and philanthropy to come in and subsidize and de-risk, because there's not any, like private capital is having a really hard time coming into the food system because the economics aren't the greatest. Right, that's why our fund, we leverage philanthropic capital to de-risk it so that private capital could come in and be willing to make an interest rate concession in order to invest in something like into food, because they think it's important. But without that philanthropic de-risk, they would never have made that investment because it's too risky for their profile.
What about like actual crops? Like, so we're importing 90% of our food. But what can we actually grow here?
Yeah.
Like to me, it's like, just go back to the, like, hey, you want to get into farming. I love that they're going to go into the educational point. We can grow oranges, and this is how much oranges that we can produce, and this is how much you can make. I mean, I think the incentivizing is identifying what we actually can do, because this graphic basically saying, I can do this, because everybody's like, oh, I love tarot, oh, I love this. Well, but is that gonna be yielding, is that gonna make you money? Because ultimately, that's the burnout, right? I can't. make-
Tell Dana's chomping at the
Sorry.
bit to say something, because I know he has
Oh,
something
no,
to say.
no, so, thank you. So,
You good?
good point that was just mentioned there, but real quick, back to about the farming pipeline. So I don't know the answer to 100% solve that challenge. What we have seen is we do have an interest from younger generation who don't even have a background. They're going into programs that DOE provides, but that's one gap. If it's not just the, hands in dirt, the plows and the sows, it's those who are saying, hey, I want to do an indoor operation. But to make that investment for a high school student, they don't have the business plan, the credit, the history to apply for a big loan. And to Keone's point, that's where the state sees the opportunity to put that infrastructure in to bridge that gap. So that's one challenge is, okay, if you're interested in farming, here's what we can do. Goat Farm kind of does that with the conventional farms, but still you have that challenge, hey, where do I go? And there's always that question about, I need access to land, access to infrastructure. So that's one way we're looking at and bridging that gap to bring on new farmers. There's also the recruitment and retention of the existing farmers. And that goes back to why the infrastructure and facilities are needed to help address those challenges. Because many times we heard some of our larger farms, which are considered smaller farmers on the mainland, but you got your whole farms, for example, how many times they consider, hey, I'm gonna throw on the towel. Cocoa farms, I should close up shop and just sell frozen shrimp and do what they're doing across the street. So it was changing policies, bringing in the infrastructure, getting the land to help bring down their costs. If I could share my screen to the next question, that was, how do we just start to grow what we consume? So one thing I wanted to also mention was about these crop commodity maps. So I don't know what doubling food production. I don't know if that means we increase how much we procure local versus how much we spend on exports. I think one approach to the doubling food production question is bringing down the percentage that we import. So we know the number is about 90%. If we look at what we currently grow, I have this for the state of Hawaii, but if we just look at Oahu, avocado, this was done by the University of Hawaii, tomato, a lot of these staple commodities. This shows 0% is the red, up to 100% in the blue, also considering the irrigations available. So if we start to say, okay, do we import any of these and what would it take to grow at 100%? Then that will bring down 90%, maybe down to 85%. Then we got to figure out what's on that import manifest. And that's hard to get because the companies that import don't want to share that information because it's competition. What they bring in, how much they bring it for. So we're trying to figure out, okay, what is it that we import? And then going back, okay, can it be grown in state and where? So we're starting to do this with a small population. That's with DOE. If we can figure out, we have their manifest of what they procure. So liquid egg is something that they procure. We have Wahiawa Fresh. We have small egg producers. One of the bigger challenges too is that we mandated Department of Education to procure 30% by 2030. But one of the major hurdles is aggregation. DOE cannot procure from the small farmers because you cannot go direct to a farmer if they're not food safety certified. Those small farmers do sell to food hubs or aggregate facilities, but those aggregate facilities have to get certified by DOE. And so we're working on that. We're going to meet with 2 on Oahu that do aggregation and then see if there's a need if the state needs to finance the facility and the equipment for an aggregation facility so DOE can procure more local from the smaller farmers. If we can figure out how to reduce the imports of just DOE, and that sets up a template, then we can expand that to the general population of Oahu and then to the rest of the state. So then it's like, okay, it's not doubling food production, it's reducing how much we import. 90%, maybe down to 20%, because when we look at the remaining 20% of what we import, we might have to make a decision. We should continue to import that because 1, it's just too much land to produce that. 2, it doesn't make sense, scalability. because we won't make the investment won't pay out. And three, if we were to go 100% local, what does that mean for other things that are brought in on those barges and those ships that now have to make up that space? They'll be paying to make up that space. So we could hurt economically the transportation rates because we went 100% production here in state. It's what you're seeing now with the whole discussion about a barrel of oil. It's heavily subsidized by the fuel industry, or by the fuel industry. I'm sorry, the airline industry. And if we take out what we do here with oil, what does that mean for airline rates? So there is that also when it comes to 100% local versus what we import.
So I need to leave with Eliza in like 15 minutes, but I did want to add like just a little, again, OER context and like government capacity context. It was a while ago that I was on the Board of Education, but there is like no one in the Department of Education in the food service branch that is focused and has a job to do this. There,
It's shifting.
yes, but there's one position, be clear. One position in the State Department of Education that has like 10,000 employees. It's mostly teachers, there's some cafeteria workers. I mean, the last person who did this was Dexter, who worked in this office, who went to Ag and is now at Harvard. So, I mean, Dane has been a part of a big shift at DBET in just even being interested in agriculture at all, right? Melly, this hasn't been like a focus of DBET and the shift with ADC.
Right.
These are all new, very new things. OER is an agency that's, as you guys well know, hasn't even been in the city yet for 5 years, but really made an investment starting from the pandemic of $32 million in our first tranche of COVID funding into just purchase from these local farmers who aren't selling to restaurants anymore and make sure all that goes into our emergency food system. And so we know, we could do that. But that was a lot of what we've done so far is dependent on federal funding that is interested in the kind of things that Dane and Peony are talking about. And of course, better coordination with our State Department of Agriculture too. So we, again, have one person in this office supported by a Paul Keller Fellow, a city fellowship, to do this work. And so I think when we're talking with Dane, when we're talking with DBET, as all of our program managers do on a daily basis, understand like why I'm excited to have this in front of you all is to like try to put more of a finger on where we could make a difference, right? Where there's a role for the city in all of this. Like that's what I'm telling Alex every day. She's on the call there somewhere. It's just, you gotta be out there, you gotta be talking to people, we gotta know what's happening, we gotta still stay engaged with Keone's funders cohort and see, where is the city government needed? Where can we actually make an impact? And I think one of the obvious areas, and there's a couple others I could comment on, but I'll shut up because I've been talking for 3 minutes, is with our Clean Water and Natural Lands Fund, which Olu knows a little about because his organization helps to manage and has helped with the acquisition of some, I think, and knows that there's a lot of issues with that, but there's $70 million sitting there from our real estate transactions, right? And one of the stated purposes is the acquisition of this land for agricultural purposes. And so when Dane talks about, where are we going to do these things? Yes, we have, plans for a facility in Wahiwa, but where are the Go Farm farmers or the new interest in agriculture going to go? And so I think there's opportunities there, especially with on the infrastructure side where it's food hubs, so we can consolidate food safety for some of these very small farmers, as well as potentially like a city ag park or something in that zone. But I am not aware that our Clean Water and Natural Lands Fund, which is still relatively new, has ever done, other than Kako Oiwi, ag land acquisition, and some people are hesitant on that too, right? Like, does the city really need to own the land? Well, we would look at it as like, that's what makes it, that in the chain of, that Dane was talking about from the research and development side, it provides that hopefully affordability and that research and development site. So it's one of the areas. We also put 3 million into small farmers who have experienced COVID impacts in 2021 and 2022. And we're working in integrating the thinking around how we use our recreation and open spaces and city development going forward. So complementing housing affordability with potentially access to food, community gardens, and the household affordability in terms of food being one, rising costs and aspect of what goes into a household budget. So I just wanted to put a little plug in for where we've been and why we're interested in continuing this conversation with the commission in terms of where we should be, and your guys' thoughts on this input.
Yeah, I mean, I think the questions that you guys are asking are valid, right? There's a lot of points and there's a lot of headwinds as to why we're not been able to scale this up. And we also have to understand that there's no silver bullet that's gonna get us out of this anytime in a quick manner. Like, it's taken 50 years for us to get to how we are now. And so, we need a plan and a strategy that is gonna endure for 10, 15, 20 years for us to really realize our long-term resilience.
Maybe that makes sense for the city or someone to use, buy the land, because that'll stay consistent, right? The farmers can come and go, but if you're bringing kids in, they're not going to college, but they're super into this, that gives them this opportunity to build on land that is stable. I mean, I think that's for a business owner, it's just like, am I gonna have the investment into the land, whatever, but if it's the government or the city that is owning the land, and then, oh, I don't have to worry about that part, I can just focus in on growing. Maybe that makes sense, maybe, like everything being, everybody on their own is not working when it comes to food security. Because we need it.
I think for us and folks who are in leaders in our community and policymakers, we have to understand that a lot of the strategies in the past for economic development have been based on historical data and what's possible in the present. But like, if you have any brains or wits or sense about what's going on in the world, like everything is unpredictable. And so like, we need these tools and these strategies and these mindsets around how do we create transformational change and being able to be in relationship and collaboration for a decade plus, right? Because we can't just keep doing things in piecemeal and expect us to be able to get out of this mess. And so what's possible today is going to change based on these collaborative efforts over time. And so, some of these problems that we're talking about are barriers. I'm optimistic that if we're aware of them and we're trying to address them, that over time that we have the collective will and capacity for that. Because we have so many different players coming together.
Jody, on that 40% number of the food that we grow that ends up back in the ground, what's broken? That's a crazy number.
The market access.
Which is all market.
They don't have the time to go and build a new market channel for that, or staff up to do value added, or have the infrastructure to do that. So if you have the entrepreneurs who can access a facility like what they're building, they'll just come and buy it. And it's easy for the farmer because they just sell it and then be done with it. Let the farmers farm.
I saw this crazy program, maybe, I mean, it was apples, it's a different type of crop. But when they pick all the apples, they pick them green, but they ripen at different times. And I forget, a student from MIT or Yale or whatever created this device to find, it can find the gas that it emits then when it starts to ripen. So then they know which batch to sell first. Yeah, something like that. So, but I mean, I think, like when you're talking bigger things, and obviously it's crop dependent, but I think that's the challenge with farmers, right? Everything ripens, everything goes, it's
One more thing, I mean, that was pretty not an inspiration, so I think I love today. The one that got caught my eye was the Department of Ag did a guarantee. Like, that sounds pretty progressive. Was that new, or is that something they've always done?
Well, so Dexter, after he left here, he went to the Department of Ag, he's part of our food funder cohort. He looked through the administrative rules and all of that and figured out that they could do guarantees because we had identified that as a need in the system, the financing system. And so, yeah, we got one done, we got the first one done and we've done.
So this is
more after
new
that.
then. This
Is
is-
it similar to the SBA?
No, it's their loan program. They can either do a loan or they can do a guarantee. And if they do the guarantee, then it leverages outside capital.
That's awesome.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
And I would just say too, I think we're even better, in a better spot, because I think the governor's office and Dane and DBED are like working so well with the city, which we haven't seen a lot in the past, and so I think that that's huge.
years.
Yeah, I think that's huge for all of this, and it kind of builds on our partnerships and collaborations, which things can move a little faster, so credit to Dane and Doug's office and the mayor's office for sure.
So have some hope, right? This is why folks globally are paying attention to Hawaii, is because we live on an island. We have this shared intention and responsibility and existential crisis and our culture that is allowing us to work in more collaborative ways than in other locations. And so we're the perfect place for them to come and test these new strategies and models. So when we talk about Hawaii being a model for the world, like we have one baking right now.
We needed that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna thank you, Keone and Dane, so much for your presentations. And then Dane's
Yeah.
available online, you guys, if you wanna look for that. We're gonna move on to the executive director's report. Oh, Gavin's giving. But Amy and I have to leave, so Olin is going to take over the rest of the meeting.
Speaking of working together and collaborating.
So the city council is reviewing the purpose and the future of the Economic Revitalization Commission.
That's a big deal.
Don't wait, how are we still exist?
Really good vibes.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
You can show the way, Gavin and Owen, your chair will represent.
All right, that was awesome. Thank you, guys. So we're gonna pass it to Gavin for the OER report.
Right, it all goes downhill from here,
Yeah.
except when Alyssa's talking.
Downhill was nice, though, right?
Just a reminder, these are the priorities that the commission has adopted. And we'll spend just a little time right now on each of them. First one's easy, this procurement preference for local small businesses. You just need to get a meeting together, haven't, so Greg's gonna help us with that. I'll let Alyssa share about the next item.
Sure, we're really easy to, Idea to Biz is moving along. We did shift the location to Kalani Ho'okaha, I hope I said that right, Community Learning Center in Nanakuli. It's a Kamehameha Schools property and they are letting us use that venue for free in exchange for some data. And they're just finalizing logistics with resource partners and working through some procurement issues, but yeah, so then the folks who also indicated that you are interested in this election committee, we will be reaching out soon to let you know next steps.
How is it being advertised?
All of our partners will be sharing it, Kamehameha Schools will be sharing it, we have several other folks on the west side who have also agreed to share as well. Yeah, and I think we might have some radio spots, TV, yeah.
The next item is advocating for use of vacant city properties for economic development. I think last time we shared about amendments to chapter 38 revisions that would kind of streamline the process for the leasing of city properties. And it would allow the city to consider ways in which that leasing creates value beyond just money into city coffers. So the folks at Department of Land Management had proposed some amendments to chapter 38, submitted them to council, and they haven't even They haven't even seen the light of day yet. I think they're hung up with some issues. Chair Waters had some concerns about removing too much oversight by council, giving too much discretion to the administration and Department of Land Management. And so they're like trying to work through those issues before that's actually introduced for potential legislation. Questions about?
Quick question, so what we had proposed is what we need for the revisions to allow for economic development.
Yes.
We got in everything we want, basically.
Well, we got everything we wanted
In the
into
draft.
DLM's Department of Land Management's draft, but it sounds like it's gonna be revised. Yeah, so it was good. We had, I don't know if this was shared with the commission members, but one of our prior fellows had done a concept paper about how we were able to use these changes. I don't, is that ringing a bell for anybody?
Mhm.
It is. Oh, great. I can follow up and reshare that. But it looks at how other jurisdictions have done similar things, like creating incubator spaces in city properties. Being able to provide like $1 leases so that you can have like one of folks in those spaces doing what they do, and then providing initial retail space for new businesses at low cost to help them grow till they grow up and can leave the
The council should walk some of the vacant derelict sites that they have oversight on.
Yeah. Yep. And I know there's interest, so when we were doing our visits to council members, as part of the budgeting process, like quite a few folks talked about that. The desire to revitalize Chinatown, for example, is a big one.
Maybe by River Street.
Yeah, it's gonna be like, you can tell the city properties, because they're the ones you kind of like worry when you walk by.
Like double bit.
Oh, great, all right. Just some highlights from since we last met. Alyssa, Dom, do you want to share about the OBC anniversary?
Yeah, I mean, it went great. We had a lot of good feedback. We did, I don't know if you guys know, we did a reverse tabling situation. So we had a lot of KP entrepreneurs that it was a lot of their first time showcasing their products, and yeah, what amazing.
I can share my experience. This was great. So I'm still feeling pretty new here. And it was really nice to see the business connector and the folks that they've assisted in some way. At this event, we had the mayor, we had a few council members show up, but the folks that were tabling far and away the most interesting. I met a 17-year-old that is close to, he's done all my life goals already. He's close to publishing a book. He started the business at age 13. He's now started, it's an LLC, not a nonprofit, but very nonprofit-y, to help young entrepreneurs ages 13 through 18 to like create business plans and understand how to be entrepreneurs. That was amazing. There were lots of folks from Waipahu High School. One business that they had developed was recycling cardboard for all kinds of different uses, pots, planting material, vases. They were super impressive. other group of students had worked on, what was it, lotion bars, toiletry type stuff, very fancy. Just so inspiring to talk to, these youth that, are working on entrepreneurship. Also, a guy who bakes cookies, who had attended, I don't even know, what the program was that he was part of, but helped with, he has very fancy packaging now, and
I think
Just-
I done some cooking
okay.
with Chris Bailey, actually, in the picture.
Oh, great, yeah. Just, great to hear how OER and OEC has impacted these folks, like businesses and the stuff they're working on. That was super fun for them. The other big event, just this past month was the, JBT Journey Breakthrough Tournament basketball, Pacific Island, youth playing in this tournament. It was headed up by Shanti and our community equity liaison team. And the whole intention behind this was so they've had this basketball tournament for a number of years, mostly Kofa youth. The attempt here was to marry it with, workforce opportunities, like job opportunities. So we had folks from YMCA, city and county, human resources, other folks tabling there, to try and get the youth connected with job opportunities. We haven't yet done the full debrief. Tournament went super well. Again, mayor and other folks showed up to support. I don't know, anything to add? A whole impressive OER team effort. Another thing that I've loved about my short amount of time here is so impressed by the group of folks that are working for OER and how collaborative they are and pitch in on stuff.
Yeah, and what's that bottom right corner photo of?
That is, so that's part of the tournament,
Right.
and it's where they had the tabling set up so that.
It's not a youth group demonstrating something or?
It's not.
Oh, yeah.
No, I forget, I know I talked to that person, I forget, she's from one of the, it was mostly like nonprofits and city,
Yeah,
you know?
I don't remember, there was a lot of people there, but Sue would know the word for it.
Pretty sure we went over this last time, but this is all the stuff that we're working on and the resources that we have to do it. Pushing out a lot of resources this year. And more folks have.
Kevin, are all of those funds live now and distributing funds?
Mostly, so the 1.6 million for BEAD and digital equity. I don't think it's off the ground yet,
Which one?
the BEAD digital equity funding
Oh, Bede's going.
exists, but I don't know that it's actually like money
Yeah, I don't
not
know.
going out the door yet. The death benefits for open migrants, that one is moving, but I don't think the money's actually reached people yet. On rental relief, we still have money in the bank to distribute. You have to get it out by the end of September, so that's like a high priority one for OER that we're working on. And then in terms of federal impacts so far, so good. We've been spared. I think no major cuts that have happened for us yet.
I mean, it's awesome. You take the rental relief and the death benefits out, you're still looking at $4 million. Like when we first came on the commission, there was like a $50,000 grant. So
Kudos to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, so most of the money is still
Drop
like
the mic there.
Yeah.
And it took 12 months to get it out.
$50.
most of the money is still like kind of leftover pandemic relief funds, so the big pots at the bottom are still there and it's gonna be gone soon. But the other thing that OER and some of the other offices, city offices have been working on collaboratively is we have a contract with like grants, kind of, yeah. What do you-
Yeah, grants coordinator.
grants coordinator to help us identify other funding sources, focus. It's beyond just federal, but primarily federal. And helping us build capacity so that we can do a better job at seeking those, identifying those grants and pursuing in the future. So we'll keep trying. That seems like a pretty critical component of OER's role. Amy wouldn't have so much more to share about these things. This is just the BT presentation, so.
Are you folks having a difficult time getting out the rest of that funding, the leftover COVID funding?
We're concerned about the rent relief funding, so we're in the middle of conversations with our contractors. It was Catholic Charities and CNHA about starting a new round. And then part of my work has been exploring alternative uses for that funding. Trying to figure out whether we could get it directed toward affordable housing, development or preservation. As of right now, I think we're on track and we're gonna be okay. Prior to coming to the city, it always pained me to see money going back from the state or the city. So working hard to make sure it doesn't happen.
You could look at possible, like a lot of our companies have issues with permitting, so they're paying rent on commercial space and can't open. So that there's an opportunity around that for the rental relief, that would be huge for small business.
Well, just a reminder, that rental relief was one where it got national news of how bad it was run and all this money going back. And I think Honolulu was one of the best in the country in terms of getting the money out.
Yeah, so a couple of years ago, before I was here, we did an analysis of the program, and Honolulu and the state as a whole was definitely one of the best. It was a model for other states to follow, for sure.
Yeah, that's actually why I asked the question, because I know it was so good when we rolled it out the first time, so I was wondering whether it's still struggling.
From what I've heard too, it was hard because when like CNHA and CCH downsize, then for them to like upscale again to get capacity to recruit and folks.
And then I think last time that we met, we were in the process of refining how we talk about our work. And so we've updated the website now with this mission statement. And then we have like a primary, secondary, tertiary statement of how we do our work. So focusing on, if you go to the website, I don't know if you've been there recently, but it basically has this mission statement. And then a focus on every person prospers, and on the side, it talks about like every person, every business, it cycles through. I find it, I think government typically is not good at talking in ways that normal people speak and understand. And I'm hoping that, so I would love to hear your feedback on whether this resonates. And then like if we could follow through the next one. So this primary message of we believe a strong economy is about the quality of life it creates for people. We use real world data and stories to create programs that lead to good jobs, resilient small businesses, and more access to healthy local foods. This is really trying to explain why you should care about OER's work, trying to capture the core of our work and how we're critical to the city.
was this crafted given how the federal government is looking at different programs?
Nice.
Avoiding,
Certain words.
like, somewhat, yes. The city as a whole, I don't think is really shying away from, I think in grant applications, yes. But I haven't seen the city as a whole really shying away from like trigger words too much. Cognizant of it.
I brought this up in a prior meeting, I'm gonna say it again here, but I understand why OER continues to emphasize small businesses, but there are also larger local businesses that contribute very positively to our local economy and the well-being of our community. And I don't know, it seems like we're just being, just favored one part of the economy versus the entirety of the economy. By just looking at small
Yeah.
businesses.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I think in small businesses, obviously like.
Well, I think it's
small
also
business.
about access, right? Like small
Yeah.
businesses' ability to access capital and resources would be much more difficult than a larger business.
Right, yeah, absolutely.
And large businesses evolve from small businesses, so.
Well, it looks like the mission statement, for example, it was talking about the life of small businesses, which is just a really interesting thing. Versus like the life of like individuals is not being mentioned in the mission statement. It's like the life of Ohana, life of communities. Life of small businesses.
Yeah.
It just seems to be a little bit. Overly emphasizing part right now.
But we are economic revitalization, should be more. Business,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
right, because otherwise we'd be more, as individuals, just more. Yeah, for general.
Honestly, I don't know. So I've had this question too, like when I'm now trying to explain what my job is. And the interchanging of local business, small business. My sense is that most of what we have to offer is focused on small business. No, this is,
How do you define small business?
yeah,
That's a good question. I mean, if
50
you're going
employee.
by like, yeah, the.
Less than
days
1,000
that-
employees.
about Everybody
Yeah.
here versus like the really micro businesses where DVED does do like some of the larger businesses when they're looking at exporting and other big scale programs, because we have an outreach team that's door to door, the folks who aren't necessarily accessing programs and other types of support services, that's where, really where kind of our focus is kind of gone to.
yeah, very similar questions.
I say we take the legal definition of a person, like.
So then the next two messages are just talking about first our values. And then second, how we do things.
I think what might be missing is something Dean brought up earlier, on like. Areas we should be double downing on for this opportunity for success and sustainability. So even like the work that Keone's doing, like. Hawaii's not made to be successful in every area, right? So how are we thinking holistic, or how are we thinking strategically about what areas we want to focus on that have a real opportunity and some tailwinds that can have true success to create the revenue, jobs, and opportunity we're looking for, and not just constant headwinds.
You know, another thing I think is to look at our population, the reality of the aging population. And, you know, as, you know, we get older and as our parents get older, and then you get to, there's so many people I know that are in these situations where they're now having to, you know, take care of their parents or do whatever. And I think there is a opportunity just to get into the senior market, and whether it be, I mean, I think of so many different little things, whether it just be helping families arrange for transportation. And one of my friends, he owns like he has like the local Uber. And I was trying to bring him, I said, you know, like maybe there's a subscription phone, maybe there's a way you can work with families, so that families that are now, like everybody's helping the parents, you have this account so that they can have like consistent rides to their whatever. I mean, you know, just brainstorming in that capacity But I think, we're always looking at products and tangible things, but I think there's a need even for just, planning their needs for families to have access to, a parent's, Gmail account or whatever, like things like that, that everybody's gonna have access to. But it's more of a tech thing that you can work with attorneys and stuff like that, but I just feel like that's a growing, the senior. Anything with seniors is gonna be, is coming forward to us, because the population, a lot of people in Hawaii aren't gonna move to the mainland, they can't. They have the families here, so I just may be identifying different, market of potential growth that is inevitable. Like, why not, cleaning out old houses that I've talked to banks and they said. People are getting old, they don't have kids, and then they go to the apartments and they're tasked with now. With their estate. And they said that you go into the house and it's like, you can't even walk through it. Like there's pet rats, there's a lot of people that don't have kids, that don't have family, but they're aging, I don't know, I feel like that's a reality. I don't know what the answer is, but I feel like there's an opportunity there for some sort of business creation, we've got a lot of, I don't know, I think that's not like something that we're have on the ground, like wait for rent a space or something like that.
On time.
Yeah, so we've got 10 minutes left. I'm looking at the rest of the agenda, and I think we've hit on most of the things.
So, okay, group question, well, Greg's not here, so we're not gonna do that.
And we haven't.
We're actually done with the agenda. The only thing we had was if anybody had new business, because there's no other agenda items.
So we're scratching the big update.
Yeah.
There's, well, then what we didn't.
There's no update.
Okay.
I have one announcement issue, and that's the ethics training.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Our favorite.
Are you gonna call us out?
Wait a second, I thought they were supposed to
I
reach
did
out
not.
about some new training time.
Did it, Dave? Cause I got it, no.
Yeah, I got one too and I did it.
Reed, shut up.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Just kidding. This is the online meeting.
What email?
The people that did not get that email are Eliza, Greg, Keone, Melanie. Olin, you apparently have a third left.
Oh.
Ethics disclosure document or the training?
This is the training.
So there's one more module I have.
So everybody, thank you everybody for doing that disclosure. That, we're good. There's a training.
I got the notice, but I screenshotted my completion.
Yeah.
And so I don't, and then it
You're
was.
good.
rolled
You're
back.
not on the
I'm good,
list
okay.
anymore.
I'll double check again.
Okay.
Oh,
I
wait,
stopped
It
It actually was not.
As someone who
it
did
was actually quite
it,
good.
from a tech standpoint, it was super painful.
Yeah.
just How to navigate.
Once I got in, it was fun.
Yeah.
It was just
Like,
getting
the
it.
city help desk had to help me, I'm like, I don't know what the hell, I reset password, nothing.
Welcome to the city.
It takes like half an hour and some of the videos are like, oh, that's kind of interesting, it was not terrible.
Very bizarre interface.
It wasn't that, it would be fast. Have a cup of coffee or a glass of wine.
So any other announcements, Sarah?
That's it.
are there any bills folks are very passionate about that? You know,
Anybody else have any new business to share? Right, so I'm gonna call this meeting adjourned. Is it 1:50? 1:52. All right, so the next meeting, we're gonna send out an email. I think we're gonna do something like, Keone, thank you for helping craft the agenda for this one, and so we'll do the same for the next one.
Right now, I think May 20th at noon.
I'm not sure when the next one is. It's
That's what it said on my notes. Someone put that here.
yeah, I did not get that one, yeah, so maybe that was in your court to share.
Okay. Yeah.
May 20th.
Great.
Thanks,
Thank you, that was good.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Dan. There.
Oh. Oh, yeah.
Oh, where did I have to-
Yeah.
They want me to do a job site.